Good morning. Welcome to Waggy Dog. Now, first of all, I want to make a correction. I said something the other day that wasn't quite right. I was talking about... No, we can't go down there. That's somebody's driveway. Good boy. Good boy. I was talking about killings at the hands of police, and I said that I was surprised to discover that 3 times as many white people were killed by police than black people, which is true, at least according to the internet stats that I found. But then I went on to say, so you're 3 times more likely to be killed if you're white than black. But that's not true. That's not true. That's one of those things you say without realizing it. But it's false. The white population is much greater than the black population. I think it's about 5 to 1. So if blacks and whites were killed in equal numbers, you would expect 5 times as many white people to be killed at the hands of police than black people. Since it's only 3 times as many, clearly you're more likely to be killed if you're a black guy than a white guy. The point remains, however, I think it's still valid that the sort of war on black people that is being depicted by the Black Lives Matter movement is a bunch of nonsense. At any rate, so the statistics, it's a classic example of twisting them, misreading them. But the statistics don't bear out the fact that there's some sort of war on black people. There's violence all the way around. Okay, stay. Good boy. What I want to talk about today, though, is what causes that violence. My supposition is that CNN causes it, MSNBC causes it, NBC causes it. Does CNN have blood on its hands? That's my question. There were shootings in Baton Rouge and Minnesota recently. They both looked awful. In Baton Rouge, the guy was being held down by a bunch of cops, 2 or 3 cops, and one of the cops pulled out his gun and shot him. Eek, that looked terrible. Now, somebody was yelling, he's got a gun, he's got a gun, he's got a gun. I mentioned this the other day. That's a tough situation if you're a policeman. Think a guy's got a gun, he's going to shoot you any second. You shoot first. But the point is, if you watch CNN the next day, which I did, that was their lead story at the top of the hour. They stayed on that story for, the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They went back to it a couple times during the hour, and then they repeated the cycle all over again. All you basically got out of CNN that entire day was that story, coupled with the Minnesota story. You just kept seeing these things over and over and over again. I didn't go to MSNBC that day or NBC, so I can't really honestly say that I know what they did, but I'm guessing from past experience that they were pretty much all over that story as well. And it's the dwelling on that narrative. White cops killing black guys. That exclusive narrative. That I'm concerned with. There comes a point where it's not simply covering the news, it's creating the news. It's stoking racial tensions. CNN, you could argue, likes that. The Dallas shootings, well, that's great news if nothing else. Horrible as it may be. Horrible as it may be, you can't help but turn on the TV and tune in. That's good for CNN. So my question is, how much blood does CNN have on its hands? Are they responsible for the Black Lives Matter movement? Are they creating turmoil at the same time that they pretend, well, we're just covering the news? During the Baltimore riots last year, the guy's name was Freddie Gray, I think, an ear witness pretty quickly said, I heard what happened, and it sounded like Freddie Gray was trying to harm himself in the back of that police van. It sounded like Freddie Gray was trying to harm himself. I personally think he was handcuffed and he was trying to ramrod his way out of there head first and he broke his neck. That seems pretty likely to me. And the witness would seem to corroborate at least the plausibility of that scenario. But CNN buried that story. You didn't hear anything about it. They buried that story. They went with the rough ride. The cops mistreated him and he died. And the city burned down. In Ferguson, Missouri, one of the very first people I heard interviewed, an African-American guy, said that Michael Brown had his head down, was charging the officer, and the officer was yelling, stop or I'll shoot, stop or I'll shoot. He said he shot several times and he thought the officer was firing and missing until he fired one last time and Michael Brown dropped, and then he realized he wasn't missing. What does that tell me? That tells me, well, he didn't have his hands up. He wasn't trying to surrender. He was charging the officer, then putting his head down in a final bull rush. But CNN buried that story too. They didn't report that. That went off the news after about one viewing. And then they went with the hands up, don't shoot thing. And that played for what? I don't know how many hours, days in a row, until pretty much the city caught fire. How much is CNN, MSNBC, NBC, how much are they culpable for not only the physical destruction in Ferguson and Baltimore and other places, but for the moral decay, the emotional wrenching, the rending of race relations? How much are they culpable? They say, oh, we're just covering the news. I don't think so. Not entirely. I think they're creating the news. They're creating a horrible, horrible situation. Because, in a sense, they like it. They think they're airing dirty laundry, which is good. Also, if they get good ratings, say that's a side benefit. But are they in fact creating the dirty laundry? That's a kind of cliche expression. I don't know what it's doing in this conversation, but yeah, my question to you is, does CNN have blood on its hands? Does MSNBC have blood on its hands? Does NBC have blood on its hands? If you're going to cover the story, you've got to cover all of it. By only following one narrative, you're doing a disservice to the country. I think they're all guilty of it. I think they're all guilty of it. And it's tragic. We got 5 police officers dead in Dallas. That's a national tragedy. And CNN, MSNBC, NBC, they're partly at fault, as is the president, with his blame the police first policy. It's ridiculous. Just one man's opinion. At any rate, another beautiful day. This is July 13th. Gorgeous. I mean, for July, this is perfect. Probably 68 degrees out. Got a t-shirt on. No need for another shirt, but not even close to breaking a sweat. If you could put this day in a jar, keep it forever, yep, that would be pretty darn good.